Biden basically during the COVID time gave the $1 trillion away. And most of that didn't even go to the people he wanted to give. Like people like Tom Brady got the money. Like, does he need money? Really? Horizon Chance, welcome to UX, and this is why America's debt crisis suddenly looks even worse by Channel TLDR News Global. Yeah, this is like one of the recent videos, so I'm guessing the tariff thing is still like crashing the economy really bad, where even debt is rising. Okay, obviously there's not a single expert out there who says anything positive about Trump's tariff. And Trump's whole thing is, okay, in the future, it might help us type of shit. Which, what is the future? Is it a few months, few years? Yeah, people don't have like enough retention for a few years. So yeah, and also like Trump's poll was insanely low. And not just like left, right wing as well, right? Was it like Washington Post? I don't know. Which one was that? It's really Republican thing, right? And even its polls were like really low. Like it did the poll and like Trump's, what was it, 30% or something? Around 30%, which was really low for president. Like that shit never happens. So yeah, this what Trump did was insanely drastic, especially at the time where like because of wars, and just 5 years ago, COVID came and went. So the way economy works, like 5 years, not that long. So it was already like tumbling up and down. Recession was touch and go all the time. And then Trump does this. Of course, it's going to cause catastrophic damage. Now, how bad this is going to be, who knows? But yeah, the debt crisis, like I'm pretty sure like US has debt of 36 trillion. And now US has economy of like, I don't know. So it's like $30-40 trillion economy and 36 trillion debt, which is like insane when you think about it. I know people say like, okay, the way US is built, the way dollar is built, yeah, you can still do some, but not at this level. If what your GDP is in similar debt crisis, like, okay, $30 trillion GDP, $30 trillion debt, that's too much. Right? That's 100% GDP to debt ratio, which is insanity. 50-60%, you still can manage that. 100%, like damn. Especially for something like number one economy of the world. So I don't know where this is going to go, but this way is going to be interesting. Let's watch it.
This video is brought to you by Brilliant. As you might already know, the US has a bit of a debt problem. America has a pretty massive debt pile, and recent administrations have picked up a dangerous habit of running pretty massive deficits. America's debt to GDP ratio currently stands at about 120.
By the way, this is not just about Trump. Obviously, Trump made it much worse. But remember, like Biden basically during the COVID time gave the $1 trillion away. And most of that didn't even go to the people he wanted to give. Like people like Tom Brady got the money. Like, does he need money? Really?
23%, one of the highest in the world. And most economists expect Trump's policies to add to the $2 trillion deficit he inherited from Biden. For context, the deficit Biden ran last year represented an eye-watering 6.4% of GDP, the largest in the OECD apart from Israel, and more than 3 times the 2% average for other advanced economies. Now, obviously, this isn't new news. People have been talking about America's unsustainable debt situation for years, and only a couple of months ago, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said he aspired to halve the deficit to 3% of GDP by the end of Trump's term. Nonetheless, the looming risk of recession and the recent rise in Treasury yields have put even more strain on America's fiscal position and sparked renewed speculation about Trump resorting to some sort of unorthodox workaround if America's debt burden becomes...
Well, technically, if you really think about it, tariffs should help with this, right? What is a debt, right? If you buy more shit, then you sell shit, right? That creates this kind of a deficit, which in terms kind of worsens the debt, right? So tariffs should help with this, but how well? Economy is very touch and go thing, right? People say like, what does stock market, like what does Wall Street have to do with any of this? Wall Street doesn't matter. No, Wall Street does matter. Stocks do matter. That is where economy comes from. It's like projection of shit, right? That's what stocks are. That's how economy is. It's all projection and how people think about something, regardless of how it is right now. That shit matters. So yeah, I think tariff, like I don't know how much this will affect of it, but who knows?
Unbearable. So in this video, we're going to look at why America's debt crisis is suddenly getting worse, and why there probably isn't an unorthodox fix available. If you're a TLDR fan and want to support the channel, then consider picking up a copy of our magazine. Too Long helps to fund all of our journalism and allows us to make free videos for YouTube like this one. You can learn more and buy a copy by clicking the link in the description. So let's get straight into it. As we see it, America's fiscal situation has suddenly started looking even more precarious for at least 5 reasons. First, the recent rise in US bond yields. During times of economic turmoil, the cost of borrowing for the US usually falls as investors move out of riskier assets like stocks and into US government bonds as a safe asset. During the most recent bout of Trump-induced turmoil, however, this didn't happen, and Treasury yields actually rose as investors drew their money out of the US entirely. While Treasury yields have come down somewhat since, they're still pretty high by historical standards, which makes it more expensive for the US to issue new debt and pay off the interest on, or service, the $36 trillion of outstanding debt. Debt servicing is already costing the US about $1 trillion a year, roughly the same as the defense budget, and the risk here is that the US gets caught in some sort of debt doom loop, where servicing costs force more borrowing, which means higher servicing costs, etc. The second reason things look worse is the recent economic slowdown. Trump's unpredictable tariffs have scuppered both consumer and business confidence, putting a drag on...
Yeah, that is so important because think about like this, right? If you have debt, like if you take on a lot of loan and you are in like this kind of like, oh, I need to pay people money. But at the same time, you have cash flow of like a lot of businesses happening. It's probably fine, isn't it? That's how economy kind of works as well. If your economy is really booming, right? You're doing a lot of business, GDP is rising, and you have debt, it's like for now, it's going to be fine. But like if a train slows down, which is like economy slows down, which tariff would do, yeah, debt becomes an issue, interest becomes an issue.
Growth and increasing the risk of recession. In its latest forecast, the IMF downgraded its growth forecast for the US from 2.7% to 1.8% and estimated there was now a 40% probability of a recession this year. Weak growth, let alone a recession, would put even more strain on America's finances because it means more unemployment and thus higher welfare spending and fewer tax receipts. The third reason is DOGE. We've covered this in previous videos, but the TLDR is that so far, DOGE has failed to make a meaningful dent in public spending, and now looks essentially defunct given Musk's withdrawal.
Yeah, that is the saddest shit of all time. Look, I give a chance to everyone. Musk is a moron, right? Now I'm not gonna hold back. That shit is insane. He made a lot of claim, damaged his reputation, damaged his company, right, for an insane like 70% drop in profit, and now he's like, okay, I'm out, like I can't do nothing about it. Why the fuck you take it on then, right? People, oh, he's a genius, I'm sure he'll get it through. You didn't even see it through. I don't care if you have like setbacks, but if you have some positive outcome in the end, at least there's something. You just made shit worse for everyone, including yourself. That is ADHD materialized right there. It's like he had some good idea, he made a car company great. Oh, he had a good idea about Mars, but that's it, right? He had great ideas, and then there were engineers who made it true. You gave complete control to him, of course, this ADHD shit was going to happen.
Sort of see this if you just look at the federal government's outlays, which are published daily by the Treasury. So far this year, the government has actually spent more than in any previous year, apart from 2021, when spending was elevated thanks to the pandemic. The fourth reason is inflation. Again, thanks to Trump's tariffs, most economists now expect inflation to increase markedly over the next few months. Citibank, for instance, now forecasts headline inflation to peak at about 4% this year, up from about 2% before the tariffs. Inflation can actually be good for an indebted government, because if the government borrows its own currency, like the US does, then inflation reduces the real value of the debt. However, the Federal Reserve has signalled that higher inflation will invite higher interest rates, which will both increase servicing costs for the government and slow the economy down even further. The fifth and final reason is the budget reconciliation bill that Republicans are currently pushing through Congress. This currently includes an extension of the tax cuts Trump introduced in 2017, which are estimated to add $5 trillion or so to the deficit over the next 10 years, and could yet include some of the more gimmicky tax cuts mentioned during the campaign, like no tax on tips. Congressional Republicans claim they'll offset about $1 trillion.
Gimmicky tax? Dude, tax on tips is like one of the most important issue of past multiple years. Both sides, right? Even like left wing was saying like, yeah, I come to power, I'm going to remove this shit. Tax on tip is the worst. Like, there's way too many service people, working people, and they get tips. Whether you work on like something like, what is it, like Grubhub, or you there, or you work on restaurants. The tip thing was the worst thing you had, right? And tax on tips things. So removing that was kind of like crucial. That's not the stupid thing. If anything, that's a surprising thing. Because Republicans usually just like, oh, trickle down economics, always like remove tax from the rich people, which trickle down economics never fucking happens, right? Oh, by the way, let's do them actually removing tax on tips was the first time they're like, actually, okay, let's do something for the normal people, like common people. That's not the stupid shit.
Billion of this with spending cuts, made mostly by the Energy and Commerce Committee. This might sound innocuous, but this committee, for some unknown reason, has jurisdiction over both Medicare and Medicaid, which is where these cuts would almost definitely have to come from. This is hard to square with Trump's very explicit commitment to protect both programs, and if he vetoes these cuts, which he said he would, this would both push the deficit wider and imply that Trump lacks the political capital to make meaningful spending cuts in the future. So, you get the idea. America's fiscal position was already looking.
Where should the cuts come from? I don't know, like remove the safety net. Fuck them. Well, there you go. That's American way. Okay, really, you couldn't find anywhere else where you could have taken cut. Or I don't know, maybe remove some of the external bases you have somewhere where you don't need it, right? Because you're not being world police anyway. You're a lot of places like your own people are saying like, we don't want to get involved in other people's conflict, and you're not getting involved, right? So why have bases? Like remove them. Like this is not Soviet era anymore, right? You can remove that shit. Medicaid, Medicare, people are already afraid to dial 911 right now. You're going to remove that shit?
Pretty precarious before Trump, but now looks likely to get even worse. And this ever-growing debt burden, combined with the fact that Trump has shown zero willingness to make politically painful spending cuts, has led to some speculation that Trump might ultimately have to resort to some unorthodox fix if the debt burden becomes unbearable. As we see it, there are at least three funky ideas floating about at the moment. The first is something we covered a week ago, sacking Fed Chair Jerome Powell and forcing his successor to cut interest rates and bring down borrowing costs. This probably wouldn't work, because firing Powell would probably lead to a disastrous market crash, which is presumably why Trump quickly walked it back, but he might try it as a last resort. The second is somehow forcing nominal allies, or at least those who are dependent on the US security umbrella, to buy more US government debt. This idea often comes up in the context of the so-called Mar-a-Lago Accord, which again we covered in a previous video, and it was something Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent explicitly floated last year when he suggested the US.
Okay, Japan thing maybe, but Europe I don't think so. France and like they're already at the breaking point level somehow psychologically with the Russia thing. And they're already like, okay, explode the spending now. We can't rely on US type of talk. They're openly saying that. So they're not going to play ball with that. They're like, okay, it's short term. If we get screwed, fine. We need to create our own shit anyway. They're with that mentality.
Could force NATO states that weren't spending enough on defence to buy 50-year military bonds from the US. The third is unilaterally extending the maturities on America's outstanding debt. In other words, taking debt that the US issued back when interest rates were low, refusing to pay out when these bonds are actually due, and instead just continuing to pay that lower interest rate. This is cheaper than letting those lower interest rate bonds mature and issuing higher interest rate ones now. And at least some legal experts think the US could do this without a technical default. To be honest though, any unorthodox fix would probably undermine confidence in US debt entirely and trigger a financial crisis. So Trump, and America more generally, would probably be better off just raising taxes or cutting spending, like the rest of the world. At TLDR News, we're always trying to help you.
Yeah, but go to original video page link from there, support this channel. Yeah, the fuck it mentality of like US could just like say screw all this and do all the solution, he said. Yeah, that's gonna shake the, like the whole global economy that is already set up. Because everything in a way kind of works on trust. Trust in a way like this larger nations, strong nations like USA will play by the rules at least somewhat, right? Like where it matters. If you don't play by those rules, people are not gonna like trust you even at all. Like at that point, like You know that's saying like money has a value because people think it has value. Global market kind of works like that. So if people don't have trust in you, like shit's gonna collapse pretty fast. So yeah, I don't know how futures. See, the fucked up thing about it is, and I've seen this trend for centuries. When a major power like this comes to at a certain line, where if it crosses, everything goes to shit. Usually try to do drastic shit like war and things. And I'm not saying US is kind of country who does wars like Russia, obviously not. But to me, it feels like some shit or some global conflict might happen where US militarize and somehow, some way get out of this shit. Because, I don't know, China suddenly decides to get aggressive over Taiwan. US, rather than de-escalating, escalates it more or shit like that. Who knows? Global conflicts are rising anyway. So shit like, I can kind of see the pattern coming. Who knows? Right? India-Pakistan thing might happen pretty soon. I don't know. It's like intensifying still. Russia, India just bought a lot of like, I don't know, Stingers type, like weapons from Russia recently. I thought it was gonna, de-escalate, but it's not. So global conflict is happening. So I don't know what's gonna happen. But yeah, right. Well, if you like my next video, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.